So I'm going live. Okay, so everybody, welcome to our tonight's Bitcoin Communities online meetup. Every 21st of a month, we do this Satoshi's 21 workshop seminar type format. And we're always looking for good presenters or other contributors, so don't hesitate to approach us. Our audience is usually a good mix of experienced Bitcoiners and as well as more general audience from tech, finance, and other fields, as well as newcomers. And this also seems to be the case today. So welcome everybody who is new. And this is also a joint session with the Wasabi Research Club. So maybe one of you guys, Adam, want to introduce themselves and tell us what that's all about?
Hi guys, I'm Adam. We are doing this Wasabi Research Club a year now, every Monday at the exact same time this time, and the link is open. So if you guys want to come and chat with us, then we are here, and we may even do some research here.
Yeah, sometimes actual research goes on. Oftentimes it's just a lot of blabbering.
Okay, so we already had a bit of chit chat before the stream, but before we hand over to Janine, if anybody of you here on the call wants to introduce themselves on the record for eternity, especially if you want to contribute to the discussion later, then please do so now.
Hi there, it's Burak. I came to one or two meetings, but I couldn't make it so often. I'm a typical hodler, not working in the Bitcoin industry. I'm in the automotive garage, and I'm an engineer. I want to be more in this discussions because this is all I'm thinking of Bitcoin. Thanks for all the organization and all the good work.
Bitcoin, yeah.
Yes, hello, this is Anita Posch. I'm a Bitcoin advocate and a podcaster, and I'm especially interested in Bitcoin because it's a tool for financial inclusion and human rights, and privacy is also a human right, and I think it's very important and that's why I'm here.
Yeah, I'm MZ. I'm interested in Bitcoin, all Bitcoin stuff, and I'm running a mempool explorer and an Electrum server, and also I'm doing stuff with the BISC decentralized exchange.
Okay, anybody else?
Yeah, I'm Max, doing research and other contributions at Wasabi. Really looking forward to this joint meetup.
Hi, this is Lucas. I'm a Wasabi wallet developer.
I'm Lee. Hi, I'm Yanis. I'm just interested.
I'm Lee, interested in stock market and also alternative investment.
If there are any blockchain analysis people in here, better show yourself now.
Maybe we
well,
should.
MD is running explorers and Electrum servers, so he's clearly collecting all the public keys.
I'm not, but I can't prove.
Maybe we should discuss that later, but I don't mind that we know that blockchain analysis exists, because otherwise we would think we would have a false sense of security, right?
Yes, you are under attack. Defend yourself.
No, I think it makes perfect sense, right? Blockchain analysis just shows the design flaws of Bitcoin, which we have to fix.
All right. So, yeah, I also think it's important to understand, if you're relatively new to the space, to understand what you're investing in, because I think there are a lot of misconceptions about blockchain technology and what it's good for, and it's often missing the point. And today's topic about financial cancel culture is closer to this point, because that is what I think Bitcoin is up against. Because it seems that not only China, but also the rest of the world is trending towards some credit rating system and more surveillance. And maybe the future will change again, just like the printing press changed a lot of things in history. So let's head over to Janine. And speaking of blockchain technology, Janine, you're also using the technology behind GitHub for journalism. Maybe you can get into that also a bit in the beginning when you introduced yourself.
Yeah, sure. So hi, I'm pretty sure a lot of you know who I am, but if you don't, I'm Janine, and I'm an investigative journalist and privacy researcher. And yeah, the journalism part, I've recently given a talk on this. It didn't get recorded. It was on Jitsi because it was impromptu, but the kind of journalism I do and I'm experimenting with is called revision control journalism, where I use Git to, my particular style is that when I start an investigation, I not only do it publicly, but from start to finish, every change that I make is done in revision control software or version control software. So anytime, especially after a certain point that I make a change, you can see that, and I just feel like it's more transparent. I don't expect most journalists to do that. I would appreciate if more journalists would just, use it after publication so that we can see when they make updates and corrections and things, because that can cause problems, I think. But yeah, that's a separate topic. Today I'm going to be talking about financial cancel culture, and this will be an exploration of the mechanisms of financial surveillance, control, and censorship, and why sovereign money is valuable in that context, because, and also how the original traditional mechanisms of financial surveillance are trying to move into Bitcoin and these newer forms of money. And when I was preparing this presentation, I actually had a bit of, I had to do a lot of research into what cancel culture is in the first place, because I went down quite a deep rabbit hole regarding the term, because it's very charged. If you've never heard the term cancel culture before, you would probably reasonably assume that it's a pejorative, as in it's used to describe something in a negative light, because why would a person or a group of people build a culture around canceling things? It sounds inherently destructive rather than creative, or you may perceive it simply as an exercise of everyone's right to freely associate or not associate with others. Then in that case, it sounds rather benign and uninteresting. You cancel a subscription to a newspaper, you cancel a meeting or a wedding. It essentially means that a channel of information sharing or economic exchange or social interaction is being cut off, or that one or more of these things is being blocked from occurring at some point in the future. So what distinguishes cancel culture from these common everyday actions? And these are the kinds of definitions that you will see in a lot of the dictionaries. And I find them to be rather confusing, because first there's a question of culture. Is cancel culture really a culture? Is there really a defined group of people who participate in this culture, or is it just mob behavior that people across the political spectrum could find themselves engaging in? Many cultures have some kind of ostracism process for their undesirables as a social species. Even other species of animals also do it. There's some species where if they live in a group, some members are kicked out just for reaching adulthood. It's a normal process, and it's not necessarily a punishment for certain behavior. So is cancel culture just a kind of millennial neologism for ostracism, applying consumerist language to people rather than products? For the most part, the definitions that you'll find in online dictionaries, at least in English, are, I think, essentially replicating the definitions of what you would see for boycott. So that's why I included the "is this a pigeon" meme, because at times it felt like they were ascribing the word culture to something that most people would consider a common practice. I think every human being who has ever lived, including the people in this room at one point or not, have decided to not support someone or something anymore because they don't like them. But I wouldn't necessarily say that you're participating in cancel culture by saying that you don't want to support someone anymore. So must be something more to it than that. And I also read up on how the term is being discussed and defined in German, not only because this meetup group has a mostly German-speaking audience, but because you can learn a lot about the meaning and significance of words when you're trying to translate them from one language culture into another. And so suggestions included exclusion culture, boycott culture, shaming culture, and social murder. Those were some of the terms suggested by German speakers. And I came across this particular comment in the forums of a German to English dictionary. For the non-German speakers in the room, this quote essentially says that cancel culture is not only about an individual's decision to cancel or remove support from a person or business, it is also about them feeling as if they are some kind of informal representative to decide who or what is a danger to society and should have the power to remove them from the public consciousness. And so another way to look at it is that on the spectrum of freedom of speech and association, the focus of this culture, so-called, is less on protecting free speech and engaging in debate and exercising their individual right to support or not to support a person or a business or an idea. Instead, they see the universal right to speak freely as a barrier or a threat to safety, which must be reined in by preventing others from listening or engaging. And some of you may be wondering, what does this have to do with finance? Well, I would argue that the financial form of cancel culture is that you feel like the ability for anyone, anywhere to transact freely with others is a threat to safety and must be reined in by so-called compliance procedures. But in terms of free speech, on the one hand, you have the Voltairean principle of, I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it, which, by the way, is actually not something Voltaire said. It was actually said by a historian named Evelyn Beatrice Hall, who wrote a biography of Voltaire, and she wrote this phrase to summarize his beliefs. It's not something he actually said. I just wanted to note that. Then you have the XKCDian principle, in the comic on the left, which reminds us that free speech is a negative right, not an entitlement to be heard. So you are free to speak, but others are free to decide whether or not to listen. And the right to free speech is mostly, in most countries, is about whether the government can punish or censor you from speaking. Similarly, in countries like the United States and Germany, you have a right to remain silent. It makes sense that if you have a right to speak, you should also have a right not to speak. It's a neutral stance. And then finally, the third perspective is denying an audience or support. And that, I'd say, is the closest thing to what financial and, in general, cancel culture is doing. It's about denying an audience or support. And there may be legitimate or illegitimate reasons for doing that, but it's definitely on the free speech spectrum, definitely the opposite of the Voltairean principle. And I think it's important to acknowledge that what we define as cancel culture, whether it's regular cancel culture or financial cancel culture, has a lot to do with our perspective on our society's justice system, not just our own place within it or without it, but how we perceive it to function generally for all. We expect a justice system, whatever kind that is, whether you have a democratic state or maybe some kind of anarchist, agorist, social collective, of some sort, to have rules that are clear, consistent, and reasonable. And then the consequences for breaking those rules are predictable. And that goes for informal social consequences as well as the explicit system of cost or punishment that there is for diverging from the expected behavior. And the method under which it is decided that you broke the rules must be held to some consequence that is fair. And the overarching goal should be that you're seeking accountability for harm caused, and the goal of any punishment should be restoration, not just trying to heal the harm that was caused, but assuming a basic human rights standard for perpetrators as well, as much as you may not want to give that to them. And an unjustice system, on the other hand, applying the Alice in Wonderland way of constructing words, has rules that are unclear and hence difficult to comply with by a reasonable person. There is a common phrase in many jurisdictions that ignorance of the law is no excuse, although that idiom comes from a time when crimes that people were accused of were things that were obviously wrong to anyone with common sense, like theft and murder. One of my favorite Twitter accounts is A Crime a Day, which mostly shares esoteric crimes in the United States under federal law. But the inspiration for the account is that even the Justice Department doesn't know how many federal crimes there are in the books. They attempted to actually count them at one point, and they haven't been able to do so. So it's very likely that even outside the United States, in some legal context, you're probably doing something seemingly inconsequential every day that some legal rulebook defines as a crime, and you don't even know it. At which point I would ask, is the ignorance of the law a reasonable excuse, especially when it comes to even more niche things like changing social and financial standards, where violating them isn't a crime, but could be something that opens you up to canceling. And obviously in an unjustice system, the rules are therefore unpredictable. The range of punishments is wide and may depend on factors that aren't officially listed as being relevant to your prosecution. They're also erratically applied. Maybe some people have connections to the prosecutor or the judge and can get off with a more lenient sentence. Maybe you aren't even charged at all and get away free. Maybe you're only targeted once you've done something to attract the attention of authorities, such as blowing the whistle on misconduct. And instead of addressing the corruption or war crimes that you expose, they investigate you for some other offense that had fewer or no victims whatsoever. And this makes clear that the goal of the justice system is retribution, or at a larger level, maintaining power, because if you have a system of rules that no one really understands, you create a submissive population that is constantly living in fear that if they do anything consequential with their lives, they may draw the attention of those in power and be chosen as the next scapegoat in the agenda of fostering conformity. And this is something that Jonathan Rauch wrote about in his cancel culture checklist, where he attempts to separate formal methods of criticism from behavior and language that is common in cancel culture, where the goal is not to seek the truth, but to coerce conformity. And this may not even be the intent of those engaging in that kind of behavior, but it can arise out of such anxiety-inducing climates like organizing collective action against a particular person like that, where there's can be a lot of emotion involved. And another marker of an unjustice system is, this is where we're getting more into the money part. And by the way, most, if not all of the slides have a link to any images or articles that are referenced. So if you want to read more about these later, you can. These slides are going to be publicly available. But this is a memo sent to NSA employees in 2005, where they are given instructions on how to activate their new travel charge cards. And I bet that, you know, if I edited this image a bit to remove all mentions of the government agency involved, you may read it and even think that it was written for people belonging to some kind of criminal gang, because essentially it's talking about operational security to prevent a financial institution or anyone else from knowing that who they work for or what they will be using the account for. And as the Financial Action Task Force might say, under any other circumstances, this would be red flag indicators, because they work for the state, and they are trying to obscure that, not only in the design of the card, but in how they contact the bank to activate it, and all kinds of things. But but they work for the NSA, so this is all fine, and I'm sure none of them will ever have their bank accounts frozen or seized because of this. This is also another person who's written about cancel culture. And one of the theories that I came across often across multiple things that I read about it is that it's a phenomenon that arises out of frustration at our inability to hold the powerful to account for their crimes. Basically, we have this sense that there are two sets of rules, one which rewards war crimes with titles and medals and pensions, and one which rewards the undermining of an entire nation's economy out of greed with helicopter money that is supposed to be meant for the ordinary guy, but of course we all know where it really went. And often the harshest punishments in the system go to those who have caused far less harm or none at all. And this is also true of financial cancel culture. And it will basically try to seek out those who occupy a middle zone where they're just well known enough or public enough to be found and recognized in the first place, and then their livelihoods are just sensitive enough to public opinion that they may actually be punished. So the proportions are a bit off. The level of retribution doesn't fit with the influence that they have, or even the amount of harm that they've caused. They're being targeted just because they are targetable. But even if the punishment is greater than the crime, people feel satisfied that at least they were able to do something in this case, given that they can't in others. And the reason I say this is because I think this is to some degree true actually in the compliance industry, that I think some of them went into the industry thinking they'd be going after the big bad guys in banking or whatever, and they ended up going after the little guy because at the end of the day, that's the only people they can really take down. And this doesn't necessarily say that accusations brought against any person are valid or invalid, or whether the anger against them specifically is genuine or not. It's about the patterns of who gets focused on as the most effective outlet for this frustration. And yeah, this is what you see in financial cancel culture. We saw this with Jeffrey Epstein and Deutsche Bank. This is an excerpt from my Bitcoin privacy newsletter for the month of July. Basically, the New York State Department of Financial Services announced that Deutsche Bank would be paying a fine for their compliance failures for servicing Jeffrey Epstein for several years. And there's a very interesting quote in the document which says that a AML officer only instructed the relevant transaction monitoring team to verify using internet searches that any woman involved with transactions related to the Epstein relationship was at least 18 years old, and to flag transactions if they could not discern a rational reason for the transaction. So that reveals several things. One, they were very well aware of his tendencies and his past, given that the Florida deal was not widely publicized, but well known enough within law enforcement circles that they were probably aware of it. But it also shows that as a consequence of engaging with Jeffrey Epstein, you were subjected to financial surveillance, and at the end of the day, you weren't protected at all. So I think that quote in particular says a lot. This kind of deference would not be given to any poor middle class person in an unjustice system. For most people, the application of the rules is often inconsistent with the scale of the crime. And I'm sure that $150 million in penalties for Deutsche Bank was only a fraction of what they made servicing clients like Epstein. So in the end, nothing will change. And interestingly, if you read the rest of this story in my newsletter, it's actually about how the blockchain surveillance company Chainalysis has a former undersecretary in the US Department of Treasury on their board of advisors now, who was serving during the infamous Florida deal and actually is one of the people named as being involved in letting him go. So the company you keep is interesting. But now that we have kind of established what cancel culture is and kind of the nuances of it, it's essentially an extrajudicial system of punishment for real or perceived wrongs. And there's a lot of parallels with financial surveillance, compliance, and exclusion. That whole industry kind of goes together, which is why I've dubbed it financial cancel culture. And because there are unfortunately so many instances of this that I could have cited, I've tried to mostly include examples from the last 2 months. Although probably the most well-known example to people here is the financial blockade against Wikileaks starting in December 2010 in response to their diplomatic cables publication. And since this month was the 10th anniversary of that release, I thought I should mention it. As they wrote in the press release, basically the US government had no legal avenue to go after them. So instead, a bunch of politicians basically put pressure behind the scenes on payment processors to stop donations going to them. And while it hurt them a lot at the time, it actually turned into a success story for both WikiLeaks and Bitcoin because they started accepting Bitcoin donations in 2011. And as Assange tweeted, and I think 2017, the valuation of that Bitcoin increased enormously. And he actually thanked the blockade for that. But for a more recent example, I'm sure most of you have heard of the social credit system being implemented in China. And part of the method of punishment that they've been meriting out includes financial exclusion. And in this case, it was reported that people who were selling or renting SIM cards and bank cards, which was deemed illegal a few years ago, are being banned from using various payment apps and basically only allowed to receive or take out money through bank branches directly, not even ATMs. And interestingly, there's a line in the article which says that the so-called fraud that they committed is, renting out SIM cards and bank cards. And they don't actually say that, they've made that in itself illegal, but they say it can be used for crime. And the example they give is that the authorities busted a marijuana business. Like they couldn't think of anything more serious than that. So I don't know about anyone else, but I personally think that drug war is the real fraud. So the fact that, for anyone who's tried to, get a SIM card without giving an ID, that's actually how a lot of that works, is that the SIM cards are registered in someone else's name, usually the shop owner or someone known to the shop owner, and that's how they're able to do that. So if that's still happening in your area, in China, they would basically say that they're committing fraud. And I think that has to do with the fact that obviously in China, the social networks are often connected to the payment system. And that's very well adopted to the point where it often feels like you can't use cash anywhere in China. And being excluded from these services is probably the closest thing to social murder that you'll find in any of the examples, particularly in that country. Another example, this time from down under in Australia, it says that for African Australians, it's getting harder as remittance businesses are finding it harder to deliver money from the community to, they see their bank accounts shut and are unable to open new ones. It appears that banks are worried about the risk of law breaking and have been closing the accounts of remittance businesses, particularly those that send money to areas of Africa suffering conflict. That's led to a perverse situation where money shifters registered with the Australian government and complying with Australian laws are being forced to close. That leaves customers dealing with physical cash and having to send money in riskier and less transparent ways outside of government oversight. So weirdly enough, the effect of compliance is making people less safe and having them use a system with less oversight. So yeah, it seems to be working out great for them. The compliance people, because they will get money regardless. This is an example from Hong Kong where accounts that were collecting donations for democracy protesters are being frozen or shut down. And then very recently, Pornhub has been cut off. I don't know if MasterCard has, MasterCard has, and I think Visa is either still deciding or has already done it. I haven't checked, but a lot of sex worker platforms and porn platforms have been subjected to a lot of financial exclusion. And that is probably not going to change. The interesting part of the story, though, the reason I bring it up is because they say that they conducted MasterCard. They say that they conducted an investigation because they found child abuse content on these platforms. And Visa, I think, said that they were doing a similar investigation. The problem with that is, as you can see in this article from Reason, if you read it, a lot of people have pointed out that there's actually been more child abuse content found on platforms like Facebook and Snapchat than Pornhub. And there's actually a lot of legal cases that point this out. The number of reports of child abuse content is actually way higher for Facebook than it is for Pornhub or any, I think, porn site. So that's kind of the contradiction here, is that the platform that actually doesn't have that many issues with that specific type of content is being punished with financial exclusion, even though much larger sites they have a much larger problem with the same thing, and they are not being you're not going to see Visa stop you from making payments on Facebook for, I don't know, game credits or whatever you buy on Facebook. I wouldn't know. And so some people have been predicting that credit card companies are going to become increasingly picky about who they'll process transactions for. And this is going to go beyond, sex worker sites. It's going to go to maybe they don't like a particular journalism outlet, or they don't want to let people fund your specific blog, or maybe you're just selling products they don't like, whatever it is. Whether it's them specifically thinking that you're engaging in some kind of risky behavior or promoting risky content, or maybe they are getting pressured from someone who thinks that you are doing so. Either way, apparently some rather influential people are now predicting that cryptocurrencies are going to be increasingly used for that reason. And this has actually been the case for some people on this issue. Sarah Jamie Lewis is the director of the Open Privacy Research Society, and she's also done research on security research on like sex toys and things. And she's also the author of Queer Privacy. And she says that she keeps hitting her head against this issue at practically every turn. Politicians, banks, payment processors are waging a war against sex workers and queer people and are determined to wipe them from society bank accounts first. And she says that even her organization, which is registered as a nonprofit, they are having issues because I guess they're accepting cryptocurrency. And as I will mention later, there are some people now in the blockchain surveillance industry who are suggesting that banks should now be checking whether their customers, even if they've never sent any payments to a cryptocurrency exchange or anything like that, they are suggesting that they should figure out whether their customers are using cryptocurrency to determine whether they're risky, whether they are, as I called it, crypto exposed persons, because that the regular compliance industry is concerned with politically exposed persons. And we also have examples within our own space of people getting their accounts shut down because they're engaging with cryptocurrency. This is from John Newberry recently, I think last month, where he was told that he couldn't have a business account with a bank anymore. And it says, we're sorry, we're no longer able to offer you our services. We made the decision to permanently close your business account. Account closures are complex decisions, and unfortunately, this decision is final and can't be appealed. It's a very interesting, I think, language in that last sentence, because they won't tell you what the reason is, that you've done anything wrong or any problem that they have with you. And they say, there's no discussion. This is final. Goodbye. And yeah, so I think that's going to be increasingly the case, especially if banks are now being told that they should be looking out for people using cryptocurrency. And this is something, since Anita is here, that she can talk about if she wants to. But Another example I saw recently was the Nigerian Feminist Coalition, and the co-founder mentioned that the campaign against police brutality, when they were told that, no, we will not be allowing you to accept donations anymore, they've now been taking Bitcoin. And one of the things she said is that, there's been all this talk about how great Bitcoin is, but you don't really realize how good and how useful it is until you get targeted by these kinds of shutdowns. Anita, if you want to say anything, or I can keep going on.
Yeah, no, thanks for mentioning it, because I think it's a very interesting interview. It's one of my last podcasts I did with Damilo and Ire, the co-founders of the Nigerian Feminist Coalition. And it's quite shocking to hear what's going on there. So thanks for bringing it on.
Mm-hmm. Another similar sentiment, you don't fully appreciate cryptocurrency until your bank has shut down your company's bank account because they have deemed you to be too risky. Another example, which people might be familiar with, Sci-Hub is an open access platform that allows you to access scientific journals and articles that are paywalled. And there's a lot of explanations about why that is good and how paywalls don't actually pay for the people who are creating the content in the first place. They mostly go to these large publishing hubs like Elsevier. And one of the people trying to combat that is Alexandra. And she's been running Sci-Hub for a few years, and she has been reduced to only Bitcoin donations because PayPal and other payment processors are not allowing her to accept donations. And so she's talking about Bitcoin a lot on Twitter and about how to help people make more donations to Sci-Hub with Bitcoin and what problems they have with that. And Chris Belker, who's doing a lot of work in Bitcoin privacy, even said that Sci-Hub is really important to him because given that he no longer is at a university, he uses a lot because otherwise he wouldn't be able to do as much research without it. Another example is, and this is probably the clearest example of a traditional cancel culture type situation, but for anyone who doesn't know, Real Sexy Cyborg, she's a Chinese maker, and she was weirdly interviewed or attempted to be interviewed by Vice, where they actually traveled to China to interview her, and she was very clear that she didn't want to talk about her personal life as part of that article, and they still asked her those questions according to her anyway, and so she kind of pulled out. And when they still continued to say that they were going to publish stuff about her personal life, she kind of retaliated against that by, I think she published the address of one of the journalists, but she didn't publish it prominently. It was just included in a video that she made. And in response to that, Vice lawyers actually contacted Patreon and YouTube, and she lost all of her monthly income because of that. And yeah, she's an example of she was subjected to financial cancel culture, but the alternatives like cryptocurrency, she does not consider them to be viable, or at least she didn't when this article was written, which was August 2018. So I think it's important that, most of us are comfortable with the fact that if, our bank accounts get shut down or something happens, we still have Bitcoin. But for a lot of people, that might not be a workable situation for them. So I think we should still continue to expose and protest against the increasing financial surveillance and exclusion in the traditional space, especially the elimination of cash, because that might be the only avenue for some people. And finally, the difference between blockchain surveillance and analysis, because this point comes up very often, and some people, like at chain analysis, are not very happy with the fact that the term blockchain surveillance is being applied to them. And this is actually something that I talked about in a presentation that I gave in Denver in 2019, where I talked about the difference. And I said, on one hand, you have blockchain analysis, which is, in general is just the process of inspecting, identifying, clustering, modeling, and or visually representing data on the blockchain. It's not, I wouldn't say it's inherently negative. It's just you're analyzing data on the blockchain. Everyone knows that blockchain data is public. Anyone can get it. It makes no sense to say that, something like Chainalysis and, a block explorer are equivalent. Like, yes, they are both technically doing blockchain analysis and visually representing that data in some way. But the difference between a blockchain explorer and a blockchain surveillance company, I believe, is that the latter has the intent to perform the analysis specifically for private intelligence and or law enforcement purposes, like investigation and even intervention. And they encourage the collection and retention of personally identifying information that is off-chain in combination with on-chain data. And they often label those who don't do this as risky, as we will see. In a conference, I think it was the Fidelity Privacy Conference, Jonathan Levin, who is the co-founder of Chainalysis, gave a presentation titled Blockchain Surveillance. And it was a very weird presentation, in my opinion, because I tried to listen to it and it was very rambly, and he didn't actually address the question of how is Chainalysis not blockchain surveillance. He even quoted from Surveillance Capitalism at the very beginning, and then he didn't actually explain, like, how is what I'm doing not this. This is basically the closest he got, where he said that Chainalysis maps transactions that happen to the services that people are using to access the blockchain, looking at data about how Bitcoin is being used today, how this technology is being adopted. And he said, we offer this market intelligence product now where anyone can go and look at trends in the industry about, how much Bitcoin is moving in a particular time, what is it being used for, blah, blah, blah. And this is available for anyone. And that's analysis. That's not surveillance. And I would say, yes, part of what they do, a lot of what they do is blockchain analysis. But then there is the, I think I went down too much. There is the added part worth millions of dollars where they help out government agencies for their investigations. And as you can see on this list, we have the IRS, we have DHS, ICE, Immigration Services, we have the FBI, Defense, SEC, DEA, FinCEN, CFTC, Air Force, U.S. Secret Service, and even the TSA. Apparently the TSA, maybe they figured out that Bitcoin aren't physical coins yet, because that was the case many years ago. But yeah, anyone who, I think anyone at Chainalysis who wants to claim that they're not engaging in surveillance when literally the function, the part where they get most of their money is from government agencies doing that and using their products for that, is kidding themselves. And even more, I think, telling aspect of why a lot of these companies are engaging in surveillance and not just analysis is that people from the traditional compliance and surveillance technology industry are now moving into cryptocurrencies. The most prominent example of this is hacking teams, former upper management like Giancarlo Russo, Alberto Ornaghi, and Marco Valeri, forming Neutrino in 2016, right after Hacking Team lost all of their business because their emails got leaked and showed that they were lying about the extent to which they were aware of human rights abuses with their technology that they were selling to repressive regimes. And they got acquired by Coinbase in February 2019. Their tools have now been rebranded to Coinbase Analytics. And actually, if you go to this database, it's called Tech Inquiry, I believe. And you can actually look up, it's a very nice interface for looking at federal contracts for companies. You can just search the company name and it'll tell you where they've been getting money from and which government agencies in the US. And so Coinbase Analytics is basically hacking teams tech for Bitcoin. Well, not only Bitcoin, but it's their blockchain surveillance tool. It's now been contracted by the IRS and a few other US agencies. And one of the examples I mentioned here, the second example, Thomson Reuters, Jesse Spiro, who is now the global head of policy at Chainalysis, he used to be working on WorldCheck. And if you haven't heard of WorldCheck, I recommend this talk since we're almost at the point of another CCC this year. This is from 34C3, and it's called Financial Surveillance, and it's a really great presentation about a database called WorldCheck, which is for reputational risk management for mostly banks and financial institutions, but also some governments use it. And it's a really great presentation because the database got leaked several years ago, I think 2015. And a bunch of people found out that they were on a blacklist that they didn't know about. And some other things that came out is like they had a job posting in 2015 for a assistant researcher. And apparently they expect researchers to be able to create 220 highly structured biographical intelligence profiles. That means you have to create a highly sourced biography of a person or business every month. 220. Like, I don't know about you, but if I had to do that every month, I don't know if my fact-checking capabilities would be up to scratch to the point where I would be able to build an accurate picture of a person to justify putting them on a financial blacklist. But according to Thomson Reuters, they add up to 20,000 profiles a month, or at least they were at the time of this talk, and they update about 40,000 a month. And something, I think you should be able to see this, but there's actually a video called The Database Collecting the World's Financial Data from Al Jazeera, and you probably won't be able to hear the audio. I don't know if you can or not, but it talks about how especially the Muslim community has been targeted by this kind of thing. There's also an article here if you want to read that instead. And it basically just talks about like how easy it is to get on one of these blacklists. Like one of the things that could get you added is negative press coverage. So not even like you've been accused of a crime or there's evidence that you've engaged in like financial fraud or money laundering or something. It's just in general negative press. Their favorite sources, according to the investigation that was in this talk, is things like Wikipedia and Stormfront. And a lot of the time they will put your name in the database just because your name is mentioned. Like they won't put any other information until later, but you might get included just because your name pops up in an article and it's negative about you. So that I feel like that's insane. And as a result of the database being leaked, many people who were in it who thought that that was wrong, actually, I think this database documentary is about a Palestinian group actually suing or some kind of legal action against WorldCheck to say, you know, this has resulted in a lot of issues for us. We're not able to open bank accounts because of this. And the weird thing is that Refinitiv, if you go to their legal disclaimer, they actually say that people who are included in the database, there may not be any evidence or accusations of crime. So they knowingly put people on this list who haven't necessarily done anything wrong. And in fact, they also include people on the list who are relatives of people who are just considered politically exposed. And that doesn't mean you've committed a crime. That just means you're politically exposed. You're an influential political person. You work for a government or whatever. And so if you have relatives who've been put on this list, then you might end up on the list. It's pretty insane. But Jesse Spiro, the guy who basically ran this thing, is now at Chainalysis. So fun times. I'm sure that the strategy that they use for determining what is risky and illicit has the same amount of rigor in that. This is actually a screenshot from a webinar, one of the few ones that they've actually published, so you can actually watch it. But I found it quite interesting because often they kind of conflate when they're talking to government agents or banks or their exchange clients, they kind of conflate risky and illicit. They or at least they conflate them to the point where they say you should address them in a similar way as if they were the same. But in this presentation, you can see that they're clearly not equivalent, because risky, they say it's risky to mix with coin joins or to chain hop or to use privacy coins, but it's not inherently illicit. X off on all of those. So the fact that they're doing that is very similar, I think, to the strategy that WorldCheck uses, which is if you get negative press coverage, you're a risk. You're not doing anything inherently illicit, but you're a risk, and so you get put on the list anyway. So it's a very low level of evidence required to basically have financial surveillance and exclusion applied to you. And this is a quote from a FinCEN, a statement from FinCEN Director Blanco in a fact sheet that they published recently about them encouraging financial institutions, including cryptocurrency ones, to share more information about what their customers are doing with their funds. You may have heard about the requirement now to try and identify the addresses and wallets, especially if they're unhosted, that customers are withdrawing to. And that's where this came from. And it is entirely based on basically the US Patriot Act and the Bank Secrecy Act. And it's kind of awkward that it's called the US Patriot Act, because it's one of the most unpatriotic laws in the United States, given that, the origin of American patriots was to fight unwarranted or even general warranted searches and seizures of private property by British authorities. And the Patriot Act actually authorizes a lot of that in terms of financial surveillance and regular surveillance as well. And one of the things that it says in the fact sheet is that the banks who are sharing information do not actually need to have specific information indicating that the activity that they're looking at relates to a suspicious, any suspicious transaction involving, for example, money laundering or terrorist financing, nor must they have reached a conclusion that the activity is suspicious or that it even warrants filing a suspicious activity report. So it's really lowering the standards for sharing personal information between banks and or any money services business, which I think this is what it applied to. And in this presentation, I didn't really talk about Bitcoin privacy in terms of the tools to use, but I actually did that last year at a different conference. So if you want to hear more about tools and not so much about how weird and messed up the regulatory situation is around the world, and specifically in the Western world, then you should probably check this out, because there's more things about that there. And I encourage you all, well, since I have Nopar here, Nopar actually came up with Clusterfuck Club. So I would encourage you all to join the Clusterfuck Club and finance like no one's watching. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Janine. That was awesome. I think there should be a lot of questions. Anybody?
Well, it's Burak here. It's really eye-opening. I mean, for me, on-chain analysis so far, and I always think myself as a guy who has a good understanding of Bitcoin, and I'm in Bitcoin because of it's the right thing and the ethically the good thing, rather than it's an investment or it's an hedge against inflation, so on and so forth. But chain analysis for me so far was something like for the traders or for the investments people, some kind of providing information to them. But recently, yes, I was seeing some small, like here and there, some small clues of this type of using the on-chain analysis, and it's really dangerous actually for the hodlers, for the people who are in the Bitcoin to be marked as the dangerous guy on a list. So my question would be, how should we protect ourselves? So I don't know, one option, I didn't go very much into details, like maybe a company called like Shapeshift, you may know, in Switzerland, or something like this, that hides your transactions to go to the anonymous site. Or do you have any suggestion for an average private user who is who wants to be secure for the future for holding their Bitcoins?
Yeah, unfortunately, Shapeshift, I mean, they used to be a kind of privacy-respecting exchange, but they haven't been in the last, I can't remember when they changed, I think it was like a year ago or something. They actually now, they're basically just a regular exchange. They don't allow you to swap coins without providing an identity, unfortunately. And part of that is because despite the fact that they are registered in Switzerland, their office where most of the people work, including I think the heads, they live in Colorado. Like they're very much part of the U.S. Jurisdiction, and as a consequence of that, the fact that they're registered in Switzerland didn't change anything when it came to the U.S. government telling them, "Hey, you can't do this anymore. We don't like privacy. Take it away." But yeah, so the reason I like to distinguish between blockchain analysis and surveillance pretty hard is that, you know, there is blockchain analysis that is done for traders. And I don't think that they're doing that because they're conducting surveillance. They're not doing it for the purpose of like putting anyone in jail or causing anyone to lose their coins or their access to their bank account or anything. That's not their goal. Their goal is to just do kind of market analysis. But regarding cryptocurrency, regarding what the average person should do, I would just say, you know, it depends on what your job is, what your risk profile is. But in general, I would just encourage people to use custodial services as little as possible, because that seems to be the real choke point in terms of these policies being implemented, is that if someone else is holding your coins for you, that is going to be the avenue through which you lose a lot of privacy. Another thing, like we've seen with the Ledger data breach or hack, whatever it is, insider job, who knows, but another thing is to just try as hard as you can to keep your identity separate from your use of cryptocurrencies, at least in terms of publicly available information. So as we were discussing before the presentation started, you know, not going to meetups in order to get Bitcoin, like physical meetups, things like that in your area where you're not having to, you know, dox yourself to an exchange. Getting your device, I mean, I've gotten my devices all directly in person, so there's not even a record anywhere of which hardware devices I have or anything like that. So I would recommend just trying to stay offline with a lot of things as much as possible, and to not use systems that not only control your private keys, but also to some extent control your identity.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, custodials and Coinbase and so on. I mean, we knew them, and they were the kind nice guys. I mean, of course. This waking up of me, like a couple of weeks ago, I watched a podcast of a guy who's owning CryptoQuant. Maybe you heard, and as a Korean guy, he's providing some trader information. But when I hear his story, he was previously working for I think it was Mt. Gox kind of legal case. He was hired for this, and he was providing data for some legal authorities. And somehow this job has stopped, or I don't know. He decided to go to the trader guy. So I think it's what you say is like in line with this. People are some of them at least, this quantitative analysis guys are working on the other side, for the surveillance side. So it's of course hard to know who's doing what. But as a private guy, yes, I'm holding my private keys. They are in the offline, they are in the cold storage. But if someone's making a huge analysis of the lines, what is going where, I mean, it would not be so difficult to distinguish me, even my transactions between my cold storages. And yeah, if they can reach at some place my name and address, then associated with this address, then yeah, it's done. So now it's giving me some actually suspicion that how can I manage it better for a more secure future. But thank you. I mean, this is a good waking up for me.
Yeah, no, yeah, that you put it that way, it's a big waking up for me too.
Hi, Janine. I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you for all the work that you do, and especially the monthly newsletter, which is fantastic. But the question regarding the gentleman who asked before was how to transact or spend privately. Can I ask why you don't recommend like using tools like Ricochet in Samurai Wallet or things of that nature? I understand the mixing, which we're not going to get into, but just that one tool of Ricochet, that's quite a powerful tool in and of itself, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of questions, so I tried to answer many of them. But yeah, if you check out my, I can actually bring it up, I think, my other presentation. I do recommend some tools that Samurai Wallet has, as well as Ricochet, which for anyone who doesn't know, it's basically a feature in Samurai Wallet where it tries to generate multiple hops. So you're basically doing a succession of transactions instead of one. And that basically, a lot of chain analysis software kind of acts on this basic assumption that the last transaction, or they try to analyze transactions a few hops back. I don't know how many they usually do, but let's say 3. And I think Ricochet does more hops than that. I think you can actually specify how many hops or something. But basically it's just a tool that you do multiple transactions in succession so that it's harder for chain analytics to just analyze the history of your transactions by going one hop back. So for example, let's say I don't know, I wouldn't recommend using Coinbase in general, but let's say you had coins on Coinbase and you withdrew them from Coinbase into your own wallet, and then you went to go spend those coins somewhere. Then if the place that you're spending the Bitcoin at is doing any kind of chain analytics, they can look, basically one hop back and see, okay, this transaction came from what looks like a so-called unhosted wallet. Apparently that's what they call them these days, a non-custodial wallet. And then before that, it was Coinbase. And they can kind of infer that, most likely either the person that they're now receiving money from is the person who just withdrew from Coinbase. And maybe they can't figure out your identity from that, but they can tell that you came from Coinbase. So Ricochet is one of the tools that just generates multiple hops and makes that a bit more difficult. And I think I have it here somewhere. Unfortunately, the favorite feature of mine for Samurai is actually their SIM swap prevention tool, which unfortunately, given it's an Android wallet, Google has disabled that feature, or rather Samurai had to disable it, or Google would actually remove Samurai from the App Store if they didn't. Where is it? Yeah. So yeah, remote SMS commands. That's the one I was talking about. I think I have Ricochet here somewhere. But that was my favorite feature personally. Yeah, here, got that. Yeah, so the idea is, and also, I mean, oppositely, if you were doing coin joins and then you wanted to deposit into Coinbase, Coinbase might have a problem with the fact that you had just coin joined your coins. And so with Ricochet, you can create multiple hops, and then you have some plausible deniability that, you know, someone else in your past who, you know, in this chain of transactions may have used CoinJoin, but they can't really definitively say whether you specifically at this address, the one sending into Coinbase, that you had been doing the coin joining. Maybe this guy did, but when you send directly from a coin join, or maybe one hop away from a coin join to Coinbase, they might have a problem with that.
Thanks for that response. Janine, just generally, what do you think about privacy in Bitcoin going forward? Do you see that we would get kind of other privacy benefits, or are you quite bearish considering that we have all of these institutions and Michael Saylor kind of elite who will actively and already have promoted and talked about that we should, as a community, give up the other aspects of what make Bitcoin Bitcoin? And I agree with what the other gentleman said in regards to Bitcoin for myself generally is not a number go up tool. It is about the censorship resistant, giving the Palestinians economic liberty and et cetera, all around the world. So do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely concerned about the fact that outside of CoinJoin and some of the tools that you have with Wasabi and Samurai and others can help with kind of obscuring transaction history and the ownership of coins. Obviously, the blockchain is public; anyone can see it, and so I do think there needs to be more improvements to on-chain privacy at the default protocol level. But that's also why I say, you know, the number one thing to protect your privacy is to try to keep your identity away from it as much as possible, because that's actually something that that Satoshi said in the white paper, which I think I also have in here towards the beginning, because, you know, he pointed out the fact that the blockchain, it was designed to, you know, to be open and verifiable by anyone, and part of that design, at least when he, she, or they made it, meant that, you know, it had to be public, and it was not possible at the time to really obscure transactions in a way that also protected the decentralization of the network to a sufficient degree. And so the number one recommendation in the privacy section of the white paper is that people keep their identity separate from their transactions. And so I think that that's probably the most effective way, because at the end of the day, you know, you can do as much coin joining as you want, but probably the biggest risk to you is things like the Ledger data breach, where now the whole world can not only know your name and your email address and your phone number, but where you live, like where your coins are. And no amount of coin joining is going to no amount of coin joining is going to stop a robber from breaking into your house looking for your Bitcoin. So I think that for most people is probably the greatest risk, and the thing that people should be most worried about. In terms of chain analysis, I mean, even without coin joins, I think they're still somewhat struggling, because I think it's important to remember a lot of what they do is guesswork. It's probabilities, it's not certainties. And so I think actually that's a huge problem, that the kind of determinations that they're making, the recommendations that they're making to exchanges about how to handle a customer's behavior based on the data and the analysis they provide, it's quite easy for them to get it wrong. And so even if you haven't used any of these tools or done anything wrong, you could end up caught up in these policies about how to handle risky customers, and you might have to give them a ton of information to recover your coins if they determine, you know, someone in your past has used a privacy tool. In fact, there's a very funny survey by Comply First, which is some kind of joint project by, I think it's CipherTrace and a few others that I'm not familiar with, but this is the kind of thing that blockchain surveillance companies are recommending custodial services to ask people when they've detected that they've used privacy enhancing features or technology. I think it was really funny, though. I kind of made fun of the way that they phrase some things. Our compliance monitoring or onboarding process has detected that you may be involved with privacy enhancing activities. It just makes it sound so like dangerous and suspicious the way that they phrase that. And I hope someone makes a t-shirt of this sentence. But yeah, my main recommendation is just that people keep their identities away from their financial activity as much as possible. And that involves stuff that hasn't anything to do with Bitcoin. It means using cash as much as possible, which in some circumstances, it's becoming quite impossible to live without a bank account, but you can still try.
Again, Gene, thanks for that sincere response. My only, I suppose, response would be, unfortunately, we have the quote-unquote professionalization of Bitcoin when it comes to its investment grade side. So we've got obviously increased eyes from institution regulators, idiots like Saylor, which then forces the regulation to ramp up even more. So the on-ramps were already, the on-ramps to Bitcoin were already closing, and now they're only going to get limited further. So if I want another million new Bitcoiners, out of those million, maybe only 10,000 might go the cash route. I suppose, putting into that context, are you bearish on the privacy going forward? Just generally, I'm not speaking about specific things, just generally, because it's something that's really important to me, and when I hear you type about it and talk about it, it is, I know you impress me, Janine, so that's why I follow you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's hard to say whether I'm bullish or bearish on privacy, because I think that what will end up happening, like there's tons of, work being done on improving Bitcoin privacy besides just wallet tools and ways to creatively create transactions. But there's things like Taproot that's coming, and, at least one head, I think it was Tom Robinson from Elliptic, has said that things like Taproot would make chain analysis a lot harder. So when I hear things like that, it makes me excited, because it's always good to hear them say what will make their job harder. Whether that stuff gets wide adoption, which is where it will be most effective, is if it gets wide adoption. That will depend on everyone else. Like, it doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much I work to protect my privacy. If other people aren't using the tools as I am, then I effectively don't have it. I mean, I effectively have it in terms of keeping my identifying information private as much as possible. But in terms of the tools like CoinGen stuff, that's all collaborative. Like, other people have to be engaging with it. And I mean, so far with the amount of interest, I mean, according to Jonathan Levin, the adoption of privacy technology and privacy coins is low. And it kind of weird in his presentation, he seemed to imply that because adoption of privacy is low, that means people don't care. And so it's not surveillance because people have already given up. That was kind of what he was implying, which I disagree with very much. I also think the fact that, people just don't understand what the value of these tools are. They don't understand how they work. That's a problem. So user experience has to improve. So I would say that the bullish indicators for privacy will be whether people say fuck you to people like Michael Saylor, who, great job, buddy. You're rich and you bought a lot of Bitcoin. Good for you. I don't really care because that's not something that I really want to commend anyone for. I don't see it as like a noteworthy thing that someone bought a lot of Bitcoin and it's not even a huge percentage of their personal wealth in the first place. And then they're doing things like recommending blockchain surveillance and not challenging the financial system at all. That doesn't interest me. So the more people reject, if the institutions want to buy Bitcoin, that's fine. But the more people reject their attempts to then apply the traditional financial system into Bitcoin and all of its disgusting policies and surveillance, then that would be good. And I think there will always be a portion of the community that will do that. So I'm bullish on the portion of Bitcoin that will remain Bitcoin as I want it to be, whether people like Michael Saylor want to fork off and I don't know, become number go up coin or whatever. That's their decision. They can do that if they want to, but I know there's a lot of people who will not follow.
Yeah, is it a number go up coin anyway anymore? If it's not censorship resistant, then it may also be not inflation resistant, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what makes Bitcoin is its 21 million, is its decentralization, but it's also the uncensorship resistance, which is why when I talk about I value Bitcoin, I'm not talking about price, because the price is a very two-dimensional thing. It's just a sticker price. But value is something deeper, it's more fundamental. And yeah, these billionaires, they're not, do you know, guys, I mean, this is to everyone here. Do you not find as if the culture is now shifting, whereas a few years ago, influencers didn't really care about billionaires, and now fast forward, we've got influencers pumping billionaires, like rolling out the red carpet for them. I just find it all a bit disgusting, to be honest. What's people's opinion on that?
Other people can talk. I don't have to monopolize the answers.
I think the best way to predict the future is to invent it.
Yeah, I think it's weird too, but I mean, most people are only interested in number go up and not in the fundamentals behind Bitcoin that we are interested in. I mean, I think most people really don't care if Bitcoin has privacy or not. They just want to, they also use their credit cards and they are not interested and tell you, I have nothing to hide. So there's a lot of, education to be done. And I found it interesting from Paul Graham, the tweet that he thinks that one day surveillance will be so big in a way that people will find Bitcoin as a solution. I mean, I hope that this is the case. Janine, do you think the Lightning Network will help us getting more privacy in general on Bitcoin?
I think, at a basic level, I think it does that just because it takes transaction data off chain, which means there's not this permanent record of all your payments. That doesn't mean that at this current stage it's perfect. There's been a lot of discussion, like Rene Picard has made a lot of comments about how privacy isn't as great in the Lightning Network as people think, and I've addressed that at least once in my newsletter about the papers and stuff and studies about the Lightning Network privacy that shows it's not as great as it could be, but I think there's a lot of improvements being made, and I think it eventually will be up to the scale that people think it is. But yeah, at a basic level, I think it's good that you still get the security and censorship resistance of Bitcoin as the underlying layer, but you can do not only smaller transactions for lower costs, but also you don't have to necessarily keep all of your sats back payments on chain.
Hi. Well, I think all the visions and all the comments are extremely pessimist, and I'm absolutely optimist in all the aspects that we have been discussing here about privacy, about the usage, about the adoption. I really don't know where to start, but for example, about the banking system. I think, for example, that the central bank system experiment is dead. Of course, they don't know it yet. But if you see the markets, you will see that everybody is shorting the dollar, everybody is shorting the euro, and everybody is long in Bitcoin, for example, right? And I have a huge inflation in my country, and everybody is shorting the local currency, and is also incredibly shorting dollars too. And Bitcoin goes up. The price is not bad. It's just how we human beings value things. It's just an indicator how the market is valuing Bitcoin. Yes. So I think people in general value more Bitcoin now than a year ago, for example. And about all this cancellation thing, when you cancel people from
There is gone, I guess.
That was getting exciting. So he was talking about his country. Maybe they heard him.
He just said cancellation, then I think he's canceled. I mean, no. Now the joke aside is, I think there one message that I got from him about his local currency and so on. Yes, price is an indication of value, and I mean, I also understand the Michael Saylors and billionaires coming in, and it's creating a different attention and different type of personality into the Bitcoin side. I mean, wish world was in a place where the Bitcoin was in the early years, when everybody had the honest attitude for all the Bitcoin improvement protocols, the right ones to be implemented, the right forks to be. I mean, we all experience, if the people who are old enough with the Bitcoin. It won't be that easy in the future because a lot of greedy people are in, yes. But also there's a time constraint that it's a race. I mean, Bitcoin should get adopted before, I think, the financial world, macro financial system is on the edge to collapse with the zero interest rate. The only solution central banks and IMF has is this digital currency. They call it central bank digital currency, which will definitely come with heavy mass surveillance and a lot of, I don't know, citizen grading like China and so on. So this part, when it is going in the fifth gear, so we don't have luxury to keep the Bitcoin development slow, because the development comes with the adoption. I mean, once the adoption is in certain level, it can be a really breakdown of the two financial systems can be fighting against each other. So it's a race against time. So we have to welcome any type of people, although they are greedy with the price, they want to invest and go to the moon, millionaire, and so on and so forth. But yes, I agree. It will be more difficult to have the awareness of the right things to do, like this topic, for example. And yeah, but it's all about people and how much we are informed, how much we will be guiding the way to the right direction.
Yes, well, I think that makes no sense at all, really, to discuss about things that are inevitable. Yes, chain analysis is inevitable. Okay, yes, these guys are bad, really bad. We hate them all. It's inevitable. Forget it, right? Michael Saylor bought Bitcoins, and other billionaires are going to buy Bitcoins too, because it makes sense for them. It's inevitable. It makes no sense to discuss these things. What I think makes sense to discuss, right, is what we expect. How's the trend? And the trend is that there is a system of incentives for people to use Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, in some way, I think, is also inevitable, right? And yes, sorry.
No, sorry, brother. You finish. You finish.
Well, so these incentives, for example, if I give you two options, use my coin, my central banking money, that I will take part of your wealth every single second, right? And I will see everything that you do, and I will let you pay to those people that are allowed to be paid. You will be able to send as much as I decide that you can spend. You will be able to send with these patterns only. You will be only allowed to send the amount of money that I decide that you can send. Or you have this other system that is free, that is you can send to whoever you want, whatever you want, whenever you want, the amount that you want, in the pattern that you want, that it is irrestrictable, right? So what, if you analyze that, you have this system of incentives, right? How is it possible to keep people in the first system? It's not possible. It's not possible. So Bitcoin is also inevitable. And finally, sorry, because I don't want to be the only one that speak. Now, if you have one Bitcoin and you want to buy something for Christmas, you have to exchange that for shit in an exchange, right? And provide all your information. But it will come the day when you can pay with Bitcoin without going to the exchange. One day that will happen, and that day the privacy concerns are over, right? So
There's only one concern. There's only one concern I have, is, as Janine correctly has said in the past and has said today in her presentation, which was excellent. She said that laws, anti-money regulating laws, AML, are brought in, and the benefactors of these laws are never the rich. It's always the middle class. It's always the working class. Small example, when the presentation was going over World Check, that was one of the tools I used to use when I used to work within anti-money laundering. We used to put passports and other documentations through that web service to check. Now, what I disliked, El Buddha, is the fact that on a week-to-week basis, the people I was investigating, it would literally change with the news. So 1 week Russia was on the news, suddenly I get an influx of Russian customers I need to investigate. Syria's on the news. Oh, what a surprise. The next 50 passports I need to look at are Syrian. So this is a political tool that is enforced by corrupt institutions, which are backed by corrupt free money, and it's the power to create money that is the true power of these rich elite. And the last thing is, El Buddha, I agree with you in terms of we will live, fingers crossed, in a Bitcoin-based future, so fiat no longer exists. But as what's happening now, China tried to ban Bitcoin several times. Western countries also tried to do the same. And I'm sure Latin America Venezuela and things tried to do the same. They all failed. China failed more than 3 times. Now it is 2.0 version, it's round number 2. Round number 2 for the regulators. They've decided we cannot take over this network, but what are they doing? They are clamping down and restricting the on-ramp and off-ramp, KYCing everything, enforcing the KYC, just like BitTonic in Switzerland. They were forced to do that withdrawal legislation to avoid the cost of implementing that regulation within their company. So the point is, I suppose my general point is, laws are never brought in for the rich or the elite. Laws are always brought in, just like the Patriot Act, just like the Freedom Act, just like the laws that came in after 7/7, or the laws that came in after Libya, Syria. All of these laws that came in, they're always against the people, but they're brought under the guise of protecting you from terrorism. And what happens fast forward to today? We have the US government labeling Greenpeace activists as terrorists, and terrorism law is now used against them. Rant finished. Sorry, guys.
If I may
Yes,
add,
but so just let me one more. I think that is probably a matter of faith, let's say, but my faith is not based on nothing. It's based on the system of incentives that exist, right? So I think, yes, they can do whatever they want, but the incentives are still there. Yes, it's like fighting against gravity. You can do whatever you want. Yes, it doesn't matter how strong the gravity is or how weak the gravity is. The gravity is there and will pull you down. So one day those AML probably will not be so effective, right? That's my point. And there will always be people willing to accept your beacons. That's other thing.
Agreed. Agreed on that last point, 100%.
yeah, and I would like to point out that, well, what I'm understanding that El Buddha is also saying is that it's hard to make a better money than Bitcoin. So it doesn't matter what government creates, even if it's a CBDC or whatever, even if they try to force people to use it, it's really hard to control people, and they will also be incentivized to go on back to Bitcoin for the more free, like the money that represents like more of the freedoms. And yeah, and because of that, like the more the people are buying Bitcoin and like using it and just putting their like monetary power into that system, I think it's like, even in Michael Saylor's case, I mean, it could be bad. He could be like, well, it doesn't matter. Like the more that Bitcoin grows and people go into it, it kind of like starts defunding the state, as long as they are not able to like sell IOU Bitcoins or whatever. But whenever like you have a money that is actually sound, there is no inflation, there is no money printing, they have to go on and like suppress their own services. It decreases to just the things that actually matter. That, or well, there could be like places where it's like total surveillance, like Black Mirror stuff. But I think there is also going to be all like, if you're active, if you're looking for it, you're also going to fight, like find people that are willing to fight and do things differently. And about that, just a last thing, I recommend reading a book called Sovereign Individual. If you haven't, it's like really awesome. And in my opinion, like the surveillance is going to be a fight, not maybe everywhere, but yeah, it's going to be some kind of a war. And yeah, surveillance is just the first step that the opposition is, gonna want to know about you, everything, before they actually go into the fight.
Yeah, I think I would just like to just add two small things. And again, I would like to see what everyone else says on it. When Buddha, you referred to the incentives are still there. I agree with you. The incentives in Bitcoin are essentially math-based, so they're not going anywhere. They're rule-based, consensus-based, so they're not going anywhere. They will forever be with us. But one sentence I did say in my answer before was, the power to create money is the power of the last few hundred years. So all I would posit to El Buddha and BTC Paradigm, I think it was speaking, is if I had that power to create money, and I had that power for hundreds of years, and I was comfortable with it, and I knew where my power came from, if I'd seen a challenger that I could not take over, which they tried, now they're trying to co-opt it, the issue is, that is the analogy here is, we are backing a rabid dog into the corner, and my concern is when that rabid dog sees his exits closing down on him, the pounce, the ferocity, the ferociousness of his response, of the dog's response, will be essentially just a total. I mean, we see it here with this coronavirus legislation. I can 100% see, and I have said, now I don't want to obviously get into this conversation regarding the virus, but the legislation is very interesting. I find that this legislation will be used to curtail future protests when this economic system does have its next boom. And those laws will be used again against the people. And just sorry, one last thing is, BTC Paradigm, you said fight for the network. We need people to fight for the network. That is my concern. When people, I'm in a few rooms, and some people, a majority of people, all they do is talk about price. Amazing. It's a very good marketing thing for Bitcoin. But if you get stuck on price and the only thing you're concerned about is price, you will never fight for Bitcoin, because I will tell you this, if I give you a $10 million Bitcoin price, just give me your passport, your identity, KYC, everything, I know a lot of people who would take that deal right now because it would make them rich. And like someone said before, Bitcoin to me is much more than me or someone else getting further ahead than other people. It is about helping the Iranians, the Venezuelans, the Argentinians. Have you seen the 100 pesos over the last several years? That is economic violence on those people, and they have no recourse apart from Bitcoin. So I'm with you, but in order to fight, you need to care. And unfortunately, generalizing here, but I have a lot of Western friends and I have a lot of Eastern friends. And because the people in the East have suffered some brutal dictatorships, have suffered some brutal economic downturns, they take self-sovereignty just on day one. Just like the Nigerians. They understand Bitcoin, they use Bitcoin, they're already on a SAT standard, whereas it's not a negative thing, whereas us in the West, we are using it as this investment, this protection. And it's just two different worlds and two different kind of lenses to view it from.
Yeah, definitely good points all around. Anybody else have something to add?
Yeah, sorry. Can I?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Well, the thing is that you don't need to fight for anything. That's also something that I can. I mean, we don't have the same experience, right? Everybody is different, and everybody has a different view of the world. And what I see here, where I live, I'm an Argentinian, and we are preparing for my third hyperinflation now. So I can tell you how the dynamic of these things goes. I mean, you, for example, well, you can print money. You can print all the money that you want. That's not a problem. You only need paper and ink. That's all. But people don't want your money. Here, the government implemented some kind of universal salary or something like that. every single month, people receive a check from the government, and the people run to buy dollars, right? So they don't want your money. You have no power. The power is not printing money. Yes, the power is that people want your money, right? If people doesn't want your money, it doesn't matter how much money you print or how many printers you have. It's irrelevant.
Yeah,
So
but you're just agreeing with Saifuddin Ammous. Saifuddin says the number one thing to kill Bitcoin is just for every government just to go back to the gold standard, because essentially the 99% of people don't really care. And I agree with you. They don't really care. They just want to get on with their lives and use money. So if they had a money that respected their time and their energy, like a gold-backed currency, they would just use that, and Bitcoin would essentially die from Saifuddin's perspective. So I agree. But when I say fight, the user-activated soft fork was a digital fight. That was the user standing up against a corrupt elitist Bitcoiners who felt privileged in the space. And for me, us signaling, wearing hats, discussing, going onto channels, writing articles, that is a fight. I'm not referring it to the classical term of kinetic warfare. It is like a digital warfare plane, if you know what I mean, like social media warfare, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I also pretty much more like that. And, you know, in some sense, I do think that we can also, like, as long as there's people who are actually demanding privacy tools and better solutions, and, you know, there's also going to be a market for that. So there is going to be a demand, even if it's a niche, it's still going to be something, you know. And as long as there is like more and more censorship, there is more incentive to come into the uncensored side.
You know, in 2015, I wanted to learn Bitcoin development, and I had the idea of writing an email to a guy who wrote the Bitcoin.NET library, C# library. And I wrote him an email if you need an assistant or something. And he replied, yeah, sure, fly to Japan. So I flew to Japan, and I was ready to learn all the .NET Bitcoin knowledge there is from the best person there is. And I saw him coding, and he was really careless and really fast and everything. And he wrote down a line of code, and I stopped him. I said, man, like, you know, this little Bitcoin thing is nothing like right now, but the future is going to be built on top of this small thing, that what you are doing right now, and every line of code that you are writing, even this one, that's going to be like have a ripple effect on negative, a bad one or a good one, and you better make it a good one, you know. So I just wanted to say that this is fight. It just doesn't really, no one sees that, but you know, this is fight. Every line of code that you write down is going to maybe even make or break a crucial situation.
So if you want to fight, how do you defend yourself if the regulatory body asks about all these misuse of like Bitcoin in the terrorist or money laundering case?
You move.
Sorry?
You just move to another country. Like you can't like fight a big government. You just have to relocate and, you know, start like trying to enable yourself to move as quickly and easily as possible, I think.
So there's no way to solve these issues, right? For the Bitcoin blockchain community to prevent a non-evil use from the evil use case, right?
Well, to some extent, we can prevent it if we are enough and we are accepting your coins. Nobody cares if your government doesn't. So if you leave your country and there are sufficient other countries who are willing to accept you and accept your payments with your coins, then your country is powerless.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's the same incentive. Like the more that people start in your country, like censoring you or start making like really stupid taxes or something like that, it more like making it harder for Bitcoin businesses or something like that. It just incentivizes other countries to actually start adopting them because they get their business, they get their tax money, or whatever they get their prosperity that they bring. So there's
I'm not really worried about the individual country at this point. I'm worried about like a globally recognized terror event is nobody wanted, right? So if there's a terror finance coming, somehow using the Bitcoin, right? That can happen anytime, I assume, right? So if that's the case, that Bitcoin will be beaten down to very badly, right? So there's no solution, basically. What I'm saying, there's technology protocol perspective, there's no solution for this preventing from misuse, right? Because we are totally anonymous and then don't want to be surveillance.
Yeah, well, I don't think there is any solution or what we can do, like more than just vote or like in the markets, not like actual voting. But yeah, well, yeah, I don't know. I just think it's yeah, I don't know. Good point you brought up.
That's the issue I always concern about this operational system risk of the owning Bitcoin. In a way, this is always the regulator from economic perspective. They always think about this thing, right? This is compliance. What actually today's presentation also emphasize this surveillance. They surveillance doing surveillance for the public good to most extent, I believe. So there's no such thing that is totally they're not going to for example, we are human society, right? If there is some event, such event happen, like a terrorist event or something like misuse, and then there's a court hearing or whatever, right? There are two sides, right? How do you defend yourself if you want to fight on the court?
Well, I don't know. We can't actually like do too much about whatever the people deciding over there, whatever they're gonna start banning or seeing as a bad thing. But then there is like the reality. Like even if someone uses Bitcoin for a really bad things, does it really matter? Like they can market it whatever way they want, but the reality is there is a lot of like a way, like totally different kind of like legit market. So yeah, there could be in some countries or some places this kind of like propaganda thing, but I don't think it's going to be a global, like people or countries don't actually agree with one another in many things. So I doubt they will in Bitcoin.
So
right.
Since it would be a good comeback to Janine's presentation, I'd like to hear Janine's thoughts on this topic too.
Yeah, Janine is the expert. Yeah, basically top of surveillance. Yeah.
Which topic? I've been just looking for entertaining things to put in the screen share.
Yeah, basically separating the evil bad guys from the good guys or the innocent guys. It's surveillance, the whole purpose. I assume the government can always defend this way, right? But how do we defend ourselves in this community?
So there is this theory that surveillance may do much more good than bad.
Right.
So,
They may do something actually not trying to just getting your privacy for no good purpose for public goods, right? From economic perspective. So they have always have this good intention to surveillance for the right preventing from evil like terrorists or money laundering, whatever, right? So those non acceptable in most countries, we would say. Yeah. How do you respond, Janine?
Well, yeah, I would say actually largely these policies have been shown to be ineffective. And I can actually give an example from my newsletter because there was a study that was done, I think this year, about how anti-money laundering policies are basically like completely ineffective. They're not actually solving pretty much any crime at all. It's like, I think it's like 1% or less of the suspected amount of, I don't know, illicit money flows or whatever. And they know this. I mean, they know how bad it is. And that just really shows that at the end of the day, there's tons of money being poured into compliance, but it's propping up nothing. It's not saving anyone at the end of the day. There's going to be a noise.
Yeah, and just adding on to that point, I just heard today, for instance, Pornhub is getting, obviously they're getting their restricted on their payment side. And one thing I found interesting about what I heard today was there's more complaints about child pornography on Facebook than there are on Pornhub, but they're using that as a case of going after Pornhub. That's nonsense.
Yeah, that was when I mentioned Pornhub getting there's an article from Reason that I think I included. I think it was right here. Yeah. So this article points out that most of it, there's actually way more suspected and actual instances of child abuse and child pornography on Facebook than there is on Pornhub. So that just shows it's really about, people disagreeing about whether pornography should even be allowed or not. And there's tons of stuff about that.
Yeah, but I suppose, but for me, then it goes back to this whole good and bad. Good and bad is a moral thing. We shouldn't say he's using Bitcoin for bad things, or he's using, if he's using Bitcoin, he's using Bitcoin. That's all I care about. It's like freedom of speech. If I limit someone's freedom of speech, I limit myself.
Yeah. Let's see. I think. Is it? Maybe it's in a different one. I'm trying to find where it was in my newsletter, but I will get back to you on that. I think it's somewhere.
Did I cut off?
Nope.
No, I think everyone's waiting for Janine to drop her knowledge on us.
She's browsing.
Maybe
That's
her government heard it.
No, my government isn't. Well, I mean, technically every government in the world is hearing this because it's a public live stream.
Is there chat in the live stream?
I would have to check, but I don't know.
Yeah, there's some chat going on, but no concrete questions.
I would like to hear your guys' opinion. Like, is it any worth to trying to like a lobby in any kind of like a law system for better privacy things, or is it just about like building better tools and yeah, voting in the market? Like in my opinion, that's the most important thing, like building tools. But the point that I'm not sure who was it that made it. I think it was DC. No, I'm not sure. Yeah, well, about like there's gonna be probably anyway a big amount of people who are gonna be just trying to ban everything, everything that even might be somehow related to illegal stuff and things like that.
Of course, there is value in that.
Yeah, if you build the tools, I think there's always on the other side, they can also build the countermeasures, right? By hiring some people from Bitcoin community and to give them a much higher salary, for example, incentivize to work against all these tools as well, right? There's always a racing game.
I'm not sure. I think the tools are going to win, but there is one problem that cannot be actually solved by any tools, which is the blacklisting issue. So you can't do anything about them. Coin joins are obvious. Coin swaps, pay joins would be swapping histories with other people. So if you swap with the wrong person, that's not very helpful. So use Lightning Network well. Different privacy there, and Bitfinex already crafting the Lightning Network AML tool. So I'm not sure about that. Okay, use altcoins. So altcoins. So exchanges don't even accept altcoins. Like they can, oh no, this is a risky altcoin. So we are just not gonna implement this because it's risky. We make money from other things. At least coin joins and coin swaps or pay joins, they cannot not accept it. They either accept Bitcoin, so coin joins, pay joins too, or they don't accept Bitcoin. So anyways, there is no technical solution to this issue.
Nopal, can I ask you a question?
Oh, there is a technical solution. Only if you expose the script, you see, it was one. And with these Schnorr signature scheme, a normal coin join and a normal transaction already starts looking the same. So you cannot really tell then anymore if it was so coin joins are not that obvious then anymore. There is quite some improvement on the way.
So assume you're right, and let's say pay joins become nearly the default. In that case, Bitcoin is the anonymous currency itself. So if you do some more coin joins on the already anonymous layer to gain a little bit more privacy because everyone already has by default, then so my point is that I hope you're right, and if that's the case, that's enough.
It's still not perfect, so it's an enhancement, but we're not completely at the.
But on this,
we don't have the privacy with that extent. We do not have the privacy that some privacy coins have.
Is it? Wolfram, I agree with you in terms of like Monero atomic swaps and technology like that is highly interesting. But one question one thought I do find interesting is if chain analysis are using a data set that they think is valid, if only 30% of that data set or 35, is it not a critical point at which if we have 20% of people using coin joins and a Wasabi and things of this nature and other tools like it, join market for instance, then is it not that we could pollute the entire data set by only polluting 30%?
If coin joins, if combined transaction start getting cheaper than normal transaction, people will more likely use them.
Well, I mean, well, Wolfram, that's an excellent point, and it goes back. It goes.
Yeah.
So I was just going to say that is why. I mean, I am not technical. I'm sure I'm not technical at all, but my layman's understanding of the proposal of segregated aggregation is exactly that. We could combine 30 transactions, sign it with one. So technologies like that are still obviously being fleshed out, but it was not included in this upgrade. Whether or not that was for technical reasons or not, I cannot comment. And I'm sure it was, there were things around its technical nature. But small things like Dandelion, my understanding is Dandelion, it was just a delay on your transaction being sent. Why was that controversial? And why is that not being included yet? Because that's a simple upgrade, isn't it?
Actually,
I know
in this channel, you have the answers for all of those questions. But Lucas, you were gonna provide.
No, about Dandelion only. Well, Dandelion means that nodes have to relay transactions basically without verification. And that creates a big problem. It's a technical problem. It sounds pretty good, but it's not easy to implement. And the node has a lot of protections about denial of services that cannot be implemented with Dandelion. So the trade-offs are controversial. So yes, it is controversial.
But it doesn't even matter because we already have good. So Dandelion only solves the transaction broadcasting part of privacy, like nothing else. There is like it's a subcategory of network level privacy. Never mind. So, but we already have a good way to broadcast transactions, which is with full nodes, which is listening to every single transactions and then giving them forward to other nodes. So it's harder to tell which was exactly coming from you and not from another node. But that's just an okay way. Let's say it's an okay way. But we already have a good way, which is just using Tor to broadcast your transactions. So that's a pretty good way. So Dandelion would solve it in a much more elegant way, but that's not something that we really have to like focus on because we already can broadcast over Tor, so that's good.
Yes, just a comment. Yes, I agree with Adam. And now with this new release, the Bitcoin reference client comes with a modification that allows you to share and connect not only through Tor, but also with other anonymity networks and distributed networks. So we are not only, we are not being only able to connect with ClearNet and Tor, but also a variety of anonymity networks. So let's say these connections will be much more diverse and hard to stop.
Yes, so just to put it into perspective, this is one part of network analysis, network level privacy. The other part is how you protect how you know your balance, your wallet balance without exposing your keys to someone else. And there is another part which is blockchain level privacy, and that's about coin joins and pay joins and coin swaps. And the funny thing is that if either of these parts don't work, transaction broadcasting, balance establishing, or blockchain level privacy, then you don't have privacy, right? Like your privacy is a glass of water, and if your wallet is the glass and it tries to protect your privacy, but if there is a hole, a very small hole in that, then that's the water or your privacy is not gonna stay inside. So I mean, I would love to talk about Schnorr signatures too, but I'm not sure. Is it getting a bit too technical, guys?
Yeah, we should. If anybody has more general questions or comments, then please go ahead before we maybe geek out even more. Nothing. Okay, then I think. I mean, we can still hang out a bit in Jitsi, but I think we can close the live stream now. So thanks for everybody joining the stream and watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks a lot,
Thank
guys.
you.
Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.